Vampires, the early years. Old school vampire action is up next. Hello, and welcome back to Howl-O-Ween. I am Barkey Dog, your host. Now, we all know about the classic vampire, right? You've got your Bela Lugosi, your Christopher Lee. We know their movies and the lore surrounding their version of the vampire. But what about other kinds of vampires? The ones that were around before Lugosi's definitive turn as the creepy count in a cape. These vampires were kinda different than the ones we're familiar with. True, they mostly operated at night, hated crosses and sunshine, and loved to put the bite on young, sexy chicks. But unlike our typical vampires, these ones played by slightly different rules. Some could operate during the daylight hours, and the communion wafer was more fearsome to them than a crucifix. Some weren't bothered by either. In this video, we're going to take a look at some movies which feature these old school vampires. Well, of course, we need to start with the granddaddy of them all, the 1922 German film Nosferatu. Here we see a version of Dracula not named Dracula, but who's pretty much Dracula anyway. He has this weird, iconic appearance that's never been topped, but we've seen it, or versions of it, in lots of movies over the years. Bram Stoker's Dracula, Salem's Lot, Underworld, they all reference this classic vampire makeup to one degree or another. Why? Because it's creepy as all hell. That's why. We're more used to the Lugosi type, urbane, erudite, finely dressed in evening clothes, fitting in with high society and the upper crust and all of that. But the original vampires were way more like Orlak here, both in appearance and with his two front teeth as fangs. This here account follows the predictable path most Dracula movies do. A young man journeys to the Carpathian Mountains and arrives at Castle Not Dracula to assist a creepy count named Graf Orlak to obtain some property in England. The man eventually cottons on to the fact Orlak is a Nosferatu, a vampire. He's held captive and eventually Not Dracula heads off to England to chomp on the young man's beloved. He travels via ship to England and has with him several boxes containing his native soil. These he hides all around town. Then he sets to work on the wife angle. But here things get a little different. He brings with him to England the Black Death, which sweeps through London, which we don't really see much in later versions of the Dracula story. And the young wife realizes that she has to trick the creepy count into hanging around with her until daylight, when the rays of the sun will destroy the vampire forever. In 1979, Werner Herzog mounted a remake of this classic film starring Klaus Kinski as the vampire. It's in color, and the story is expanded a bit and uses the proper names from Dracula. One of my viewers, Daniel, sent me this. Thanks, man. I've been wanting to see this for years. It'd show up on Amazon Prime, and I put it on my watch list, and then when I was in the mood to screen the movie, it wouldn't be available anymore. And it happened again. So now I have this nice Blu-ray edition. Thanks. This movie was shot in both German and English, so technically there are two versions of it. Both are on the Blu-ray. It looks great. Herzog is a master filmmaker, so no surprise. The tone, the cinematography, it's all nicely realized. Not that the movie was easy to make. The first problem they had was getting rats. Herzog wanted a bunch of live rats, but they couldn't find any they could use. So they got some white rats from a laboratory supply company. Anyway, the poor rats got treated pretty badly by all accounts. First, they had to be fixed so they wouldn't procreate. Then they were locked up so much they'd start fighting, and then they had to be dyed to make them black, which meant dipping the rats in a boiling dye solution. This didn't work, as the surviving rats just kind of looked gray at best. Oh, rats. Another problem was Klaus Kinski. He was, by all accounts, kind of a jerk to work with. He wanted to play the Count all over the top and stuff, so to tone him down, Herzog would provoke arguments with the star until Kinski tuckered himself out throwing a temper tantrum. Then he didn't have the energy to play the part too broadly. Kinski had played Renfield in a 1970 version of Dracula that had Christopher Lee in it, no less, and Kinski later reprised his role as Nosferatu in a 1988 movie called Vampire in Venice. It's not as good. Herzog's Nosferatu is really a fine, atmospheric, and European-centric version of the vampire tale, with a twist ending, and well worth a watch. Then there's Leonor, a Spanish-Italian-French production from 1975. In this one, the main protagonist here is not a very nice guy, and he's very hard to root for. This is set in medieval times, and this baron, or whatever he is, has himself a hot, sexy chick for a wife named Leonor. But then she dies when a horse falls on her, so the first thing he does is kill the horse. Then have his now dead hot, sexy chick wife laid to rest in a tomb. Later that same day, he goes to a tenant's house and tells him he's gonna marry his hot, sexy daughter today. So bring her over to the castle, which he does. He marries this new hot, sexy chick, and time passes. About 10 years later, he's now got 2 kids by his new hot, sexy chick wife, but he's not happy. He keeps longing for his dead hot, sexy chick wife. Things reach a point where he starts camping out in the dead hot, sexy chick's wife's tomb. Then he makes a deal with the devil to bring the dead hot, sexy chick back. Never mind that he's already married to a living hot, sexy chick wife who's given him 2 kids. But he wants the dead hot, sexy chick wife who hasn't had 2 kids. So the devil brings the dead hot, sexy chick wife back to life, only there's a catch. You guessed it, she's a vampire. The moral of this story is that when dealing with the devil, you should always check the fine print. What's different here is that the vampire is almost more like a succubus. She drains your life force, so we don't really see the traditional fangs and blood dripping down the vampire's chin and all of that. Plus, this is set during the time of the Black Death, which is coming closer and closer to this town every day. And it's implied the vampire is bringing it. Liv Ullmann stars as the titular vampire. This one is different anyway, although I still prefer my Lugosi or Lee vampires to this one. Kino Lorber has a nice edition that features both the US and international cuts of the picture. Finally, there's The Hunger from 1993. David Bowie and Catherine Deneuve are a couple of modern-day vampires living the high life. Unlike regular vampires, these ones use blades instead of fangs. They cast reflections, and sunlight doesn't seem to bother them. Here, Deneuve has eternal life and has been around since Egyptian times. But there's a problem. Her lovers don't have eternal life. She's been with her current boyfriend since the 1700s, but now Billy Idol here has run out of time. See, when their time's up, these lovers age rapidly until they're pretty much desiccated cadavers that aren't quite dead. When that happens, she puts her lover in a box up in the attic, and she has an attic full of boxes. Here's where Susan Sarandon comes in. She's working for a foundation studying the human's life clock, the thing that determines when and how we age. Ziggy Stardust tries to consult her, but she thinks he's just a kook, and while she keeps him waiting, he ages decades in the span of a few hours. But Deneuve is now turned on to Sarandon, and they have a hot makeout session of the lesbotic variety, because the vampire chick swings both ways. After that, Sarandon is on her way to becoming a newly minted vampire. This movie is simply excellent. The cinematography is wonderful, the soundtrack is great, and the original source material was a book by Whitley Strieber, who also wrote the book that became Wolfen, another fine movie we talked about last time. If you look fast, you'll see William Dafoe appear in a very early role, and Anne Magnuson from Making Mr. Right makes a brief appearance as some vampire chow. A very highly recommended movie. Well, I hope you enjoyed Howl-O-Ween this year. Be sure to subscribe to my channels, and I'll be back soon with more movie review videos. In the meantime,